Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the Payoff, Scott D is one of the people who helped me get sober, and he continues to help others get sober today. He's a New York guy. He lives in Philadelphia now, and he embodies what I want out of recovery, which is why he's a guy that I always talk to and a guy that I think so highly of. You want to listen to this story if you're trying to get sober, or if you're sober and just trying to get today, this is the guy. Scott D, coming up. But first, Kevin Susan.
I've been doing an occasional one of these with Peter.
In what capacity?
So he sits
co-host, sidekick.
Yeah.
Really?
I swear to God. He was on for Dave C. He was on for another guy. Yeah,
I don't understand why you have to change your name. If Mike Hamilton's the sound guy and the guy putting the whole thing together, you can't have two mics.
No, you can't.
And then microphones. It's very confusing.
Yeah, Mike Hamilton wants out of this thing. I don't even know him, and I know he's done with this shit.
Yeah, you might be right.
That's for sure.
All right, Scott, so you know how this goes, right? We're going to take you through your experience.
I've listened, you ask me questions, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And I answer.
Where are you now? You're in Naples.
I'm in Florida for 3 months. Yeah.
What's the weather like?
It's it was a little cold today. It was like 65, 64.
Oh.
Yes.
So you're playing golf? Did you play golf today?
I played golf this morning, yes.
How's your energy?
My energy's okay. Yeah, I'm a little tired here and there.
Yeah.
But I walked 18 holes today. So
wow.
That's good. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Playing tomorrow, playing Wednesday, playing Friday.
Well, you couldn't play. Obviously, you're playing Wednesday because Mike had to switch his schedule for you.
Yeah, I know.
Wednesday. I had something going on Wednesday afternoon.
Golf?
You're playing golf, Scott.
Oh, Wednesday morning.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, what about, can I just say something before we get started?
This is the last thing he's going to say.
Okay. Like Scott's got that big brother intimidation, I think, to both of us a little bit. And I know in a good way, like big
don't
brother.
Don't be scared, Mike.
Me?
Yeah, don't be scared.
No, but I'm saying, you waited this long to ask Scott to be on the podcast because you were afraid he'd be like, I'm not doing that ridiculous
100%. Like there's certain people.
And my girls were asking me how come I wasn't on. I go, I've never been asked.
That's why.
You have to respect. Yeah. Honestly, there's certain people. Peter F was kind of weird about it, of course, right? But he was like, "Well, let me figure out like how I'm going to do it. I can't have any video."
We're supposed to stay anonymous at press, radio, and film, but that doesn't mean you can't talk about it.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. So like we'll put it out, then you'll be Scott D, and that'll be it.
Yeah. Well, Pete had less fear of Tony Mandrich, Hollywood Henderson,
I know.
Chris Terrian than he did of Scott. That's just the best.
See that?
Hillary Phelps.
Yeah. I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
All right. So Scott, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Queens, in Rockaway Beach, New York, which is the beginning of Long Island. So Montauk's out here. It's right outside of Brooklyn. It's on the other end. And it was, the Irish Riviera, we call it, So I grew up about 150 yards from the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. Year round, we lived there.
So you grow up, and what was it like? What was the environment like in the household? Before we get outside and what your friends were like and stuff like that, but what was the environment like that you grew up in?
The environment was good. I had a great mother and father, who came from really crazy backgrounds, who showed up for their kids. My father provided well for us, went to New York City every day to work for the same company for 35 years. And my mom worked in a florist a couple of days a week for cash on the side, so she didn't have to bother my father. And then we went to Catholic school, Catholic high school, pretty good colleges, and so home wise, it wasn't bad, and education was pushed on us. That and Catholicism and going to church and being a good kid.
For me and Mike Souza, it's easy for us to trace like where the alcoholism was in our family. It was really like heavy duty on my dad's side. Was there a spot you could point it out in your family? Was there any of that?
Yeah, my mother's father died of cirrhosis. So there's obviously a link there. My mother's mother was supposedly a full-blown 24-hour drunk who left my mother's house and walked out when she was 13 and never to be seen again. Moved to the other side of the Bronx, we found out maybe 10, 15 years ago, and had some more kids, but never divorced my mother's, her husband, and was gone. So,
so this is your grandmother.
Yeah, who I never met. Yeah, yep. And my father's side, I would think there is some, but he always blamed my mom's side. That's the way it was with my dad. That's from your mother's side of the family.
So you have relatives from that side. Have you met them? Have you interacted with them at all?
No. They reached out to my mother maybe 15 years ago and maybe longer, maybe 20 years ago, and wanted to get it together because when her mom died, there was a listing of number of kids on the birth certificate prior to the oldest son in their family, right? And this guy did his homework and tracked my mom and my mom's brother down and asked my mom if she wanted to get together and all that stuff. And my mom said no and hung up the phone. And my mother's brother, my Uncle Bud, he got together with him because he's a riot. And he met him and hung out with him for a while. And then he got tired of him, kind of blew him off. But there was some contact later in life.
I got to ask Mike, this is like the Oprah Winfrey show. We're making amazing discoveries here on an emotional level. Scott, when you're, I guess 15 years ago, so you're probably what, like 15, 16 years sober? Like, how did you handle this?
More than that.
Yeah.
My mom was an open book if you asked her questions, but she wasn't divulging it, and she felt like she hit the lottery with, having 3 sons and a husband. Where she came from in terms of her background is just, was just a home run. Like the life that she got to live versus the chaotic life she lived in the Bronx. Her brother also, she had another brother who fell off a roof at 19 in the Bronx and died. And I don't know, we were told he was jumping building to building, but I think there's more to the story.
Oh,
yeah.
The similarities between Scott's family and ours are just so intense. The 3 brothers relate to so much of that. The mom, like perfect life and not, don't focus on this over here, but let's focus on what we've made here. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So what was the environment like in the neighborhood? Like, when did you start kicking around doing drugs and drinking? How old?
I was 11 when I had my first drink. My brother was having a party downstairs. My older brother and my twin brother and I had a party upstairs. I drank 5 12-ounce Michelobs and I puked all the way to the beach and back outside of my parents' house. And it was, I was just out. It was just too much for a little kid, but loved it and couldn't wait to do it again. I was off to the races. Off to the races.
When did it start to be? I was like, when I finally got to high school, and like, even if I didn't drink, I didn't drink every day, but I would so look forward to the next time I was going to drink. I think it was the same thing with Mike. Like, that was probably as controlled as it ever got for me, really. I mean, what was that like for you when you started to drink consistently and you're still in high school or grade school even?
Well, grade school, you were hiding it, right? It was a weekend war. You were making excuses on whose houses you were staying at and all that kind of stuff. But I grew up, you got to remember, I grew up in a neighborhood that was, I always like to say that you were taught to how to drink and how to fight, and I sucked at both of them, and so there was never a fist my face didn't run into, and that was really the truth, which was, if you had a disagreement, you had to fight, but you were also around the booze. So by the time high school, and it was 18 back then, you got to remember it was 18, the drinking age. So I was drinking in my house when I was almost 17. I was allowed to drink in the house. Think about that today, right? But we were allowed to drink in the house, and I had friends who were allowed to drink in their houses a lot younger than that. So we were going to bars when we were 14. We were going out, I worked in the restaurant business, which is just an invitation for chaos. And, you get to close the restaurant and then go out and say, you got off work at 11, you tell your parents get off at 2. So there was a lot of opportunities. And in that environment, you really found the older people to hang out with.
Mike,
a lot of fun and really liked us.
Mike Sousa, I was thinking about this, and it just plays right into what Scott's saying. Michael and my brother Kevin, and they kind of paved the way working at Smokey Joe's, right, the Villanova bar. And there was a lot of access to a lot of stuff that we otherwise wouldn't have had that early on in life. And I think, like, if you're an alcoholic, I think you're going to be an alcoholic. But, man, that restaurant industry, really, you hit the gas, man.
It's a fast forward button, really.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. It was crazy. Everything was going on in that place. Everybody was older, and they were all bad influences, and I loved every minute of it, I was a dishwasher with my brother, and it was crazy. The place was nuts. It was called the Bell Harbor Yacht Club, right? And the boats went away in 63, a hurricane in 63 from the yacht club, and they were never replaced.
Oh,
so there was no boats, but it was a yacht, They had 2 tennis courts and 2 bocce courts. That's it. They had a Commodore. They had, everything, but there was no boats. And so, we worked there, and it was just crazy. It was just a place to drink for all these people. Drink and eat. It was nuts.
What was your relationship like with your brothers as far as hanging out and drinking and stuff?
My older brother was, doing his own thing. And then I hung out with my twin regularly, but it was tough for us to differentiate ourselves. We were always just looked at as like the twins. So I always tried to be a little crazier and a little more of an idiot. And honestly, in retrospect, and I've dealt with this, I wasn't good to him. I was, I was always I'm picking on him too. And, trying to just give him a dig and build myself up that, I was more important or more fun or crazier. And there was no reason for it other than fear and being scared, just being a young kid and finding my way, but being infused with alcohol and drugs at such a young age. I never really had an opportunity to look at all that. I was just on fast, autopilot as a young kid.
Now, with a focus on education in your house, right?
Yeah.
So you're, obviously being pushed to get good grades. Is drinking and other things, is that affecting you at this point? Like, when do you start to get into a real
I was a straight A student through grade 1 through grade 8. And my older brother was just grade 2. My twin and I we all went to high school in Manhattan. We went to Xavier High School in New York City, Jesuit High School. We started our freshman year with 360 kids and graduated with 190. Everyone else got thrown out or failed out.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. And yet, school-wise, I always did well, even in high school. I might have had moments here and there where I might take a class that was too hard, but like AP geometry or something like that got me in trouble once. But for the most part, I got really, really decent grades and was able to just, put myself in a position where that wasn't a problem with my mom and dad because I was getting good grades. The wheels came off in college. The wheels absolutely just fell off. I was 17 when I started college, so that was the problem.
Real quick, before you got to college, were you, you're in Manhattan, like when was the first time you smoked a joint or did like a line of cocaine? Was that at all in high school or was that?
Oh yeah. I was first time I smoked a joint was probably ninth grade, ninth and 10th grade, and off to the races with it. Same with everything else. I also took a lot of Quaaludes when I was in high school. Not good, not a good thing. I took a lot of acid in high school, like a ton of mescaline in high school. I snorted my first line of cocaine probably my junior year in high school. Because I went to my prom with an 8-ball of coke in my pocket for my prom.
Did you think that this stuff, like, did you think like, oh, like if you can look back all the way back there, like it kind of was like, oh, this is something, because I always saw it as a gift to being able to hang out with people. It's like the huge mind fuck, right? But like, did you see that as like it was going to be this conduit to like good times socially? Like, wow, this thing is awesome because you're still getting really good grades too.
Yeah. I felt like I never thought that until I got to college that this was out of control, right? In high school, I just felt like, you're growing up, this is what people do. Everybody was doing it. I didn't know anybody a few guys, but everybody was off to the races. And there was always guys worse than you. And I was getting grades and I was going to go to college when a lot of my buddies were getting their GEDs and going to work at companies, or a lot of them became firemen and cops and sanitation men and went into the trades in terms of the unions. So they were all, when I was in college, they were all making money, some of them making good money at what they were doing. And, I was a broke college kid, So, but in high school, I definitely, it allowed you, to be with what you thought were the cool guys at the time and put you in a position of, maybe a little bit of status by being able to have, some drugs on you when other people might not have. But it was all going to the same place, which was, I had no shot at it, a good quality of life because of what I was doing.
You find that like you stunted your growth socially early on, right?
Yeah.
So because when you're starting at 11, right, you don't develop that.
Yes. I didn't have any, I grew up with all brothers, right? And I didn't know how to talk to anybody other than, drunken guys, I didn't have any game whatsoever in terms of relationships with girls and stuff like that. The only relationship I ever had that was great was with a girl that was older than my brother and I, actually, that worked with us in the restaurants. And she was 5 years older than us. And when I was 16, she died in a car accident with her and another girl from the neighborhood when I was 16. And I just, she was the first person, in my opinion, that I understood what unconditional love was. And I was devastated and never really dealt with it. And so from 16 on, I just had, I wouldn't say it was a death wish, but I just didn't care as much. Kind of lost my faith along the way, and just relied on myself and what I was up to, which wasn't good. But that was my first understanding of what a relationship was. But it wasn't even sexual; it was just a platonic, but a great person. You know what I mean? And what a great, tragic loss that really, just was terrible, and for the neighborhood too, like everybody knew it, and it was devastating, So at the end, that was kind of my foray into college, was just, if I have drink in my hand and drugs in my pocket, everything will be fine.
So you hit college, you go to Villanova, you end up,
Yeah.
Outside of Philadelphia on the main line, this nice area. When you got to college, were you the bad influence? Because I'm like on other people. Like, how did you hit
definitely
college?
was. Yeah, everybody was showing up with computers, you know what I mean, and lots of books and stuff. And I had a case of beer and a bag of weed in my pocket, and I'm like, I can't wait for my parents to leave, and this is going to be a lot of fun. And it's not hard to find like-minded people. And I found probably 30 guys in 6 months that wanted to drink and run around like I did, and school was secondary. No ifs, ands, or buts. Found them very fast. Some on my dorm or just through other guys and parties we went to. It wasn't hard to find. Some failed out and never saw again. Some failed out or were kicked out. It was a variety of different reasons, but I certainly was a bad influence.
But it's starting to affect your grades and everything at this point, right? Early on?
Dude, right away, I got a 2.5 my first semester, like a 2.4 my second semester, and I was saying things were hard, but I wasn't going to school as much as I should. I wasn't studying as much as I should, and then so that was my freshman year. My sophomore year, I actually failed 3 classes. For the first time, I was failing classes. Academic probation, I got a 1.9 one semester, and I had to go to school in the summers, in summer school at Villanova, and also I failed public speaking in college.
You can speak.
Public speaking. It was on the other side of campus at 8:00 in the morning, and there was no way I was going to make this class.
Forget it.
I went to 2 classes, and that was it. It was over. It was over. But my grades went, in the toilet. And I was in the business school and the finance degree, and it wasn't fun, especially accounting classes and, a lot of the stuff that was your core curriculum. It was just hard when you don't study and you don't go to class. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge problem for me.
Well, and early in your life and early in college, this thing that is such a huge part of you now, like the alcohol and the drugs, it's officially turning on you. Are you able to kind of wrap your mind around that? Or do you just like at a young age, like I just kept drinking and using?
Yeah, I really thought that, I had some bad luck. I got a couple of lousy teachers. It would have been a little different. But I was out of control sophomore year. I was taking, I was doing Quaaludes and stuff like that. So my answer was no more Quaaludes after my sophomore year. I stopped taking those pills, right?
What were those, by the way, people don't know too much about Quaaludes. Like, what were those drugs doing for you? Like, they were like, you can't really even get them anymore.
It's like taking 10 Valiums in one shot. They were just
mescaline.
Mescaline is acid. So it's it's not mushrooms, which I did, but it was just, like a tiny little pill, like microdot. It was really, really small. And, it was acid. Yeah.
I took Ludes once, and I went down the shore with Murph, and we were at Wawa, and I couldn't talk. I could barely stand.
Yeah.
And this woman came up, Mike, I don't know who the woman was to this day. She approaches Murph and I, and she's like, "Oh, like you're Terry Souza's son," like talking to me. And I was like, yeah. And Murph's like, he goes, "Lady, you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong." And we went to Wawa and just went on our merry way, like no problem,
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's
I wonder who that was.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Who was that?
Yeah. I knew to stay away from them because I was drinking. I mean, there's 1,000 stories. They're all the same. But I went from Connecticut to Florida. Don't even remember it. Sitting in the backseat of some guy's car for spring break. You know what I mean? I got in a fight with him before we left, and he was like 3 times the size of me. It was horrible. And that always happened. Like I would get my ass kicked every time I would do stuff like that. And I wasn't fun to be around, but there were people like-minded people who put up with me, I guess.
What was the scene like in the 80s at a school, a college, with cocaine and stuff like that?
I mean, it was readily available, and certainly, especially when you're involved in helping it be more available. um, but it was, I was the drug dealer's dream, which was, I just want to break even, which is the funniest thing you could ever say to a guy. It's no shot, right? But it was everywhere, and everybody was doing it. But there was a huge subset of that school that was going to class and doing well, and and looking at careers in Wall Street and graduate school and law school, and really had it tight. I just didn't know. I might have known them,
Yeah,
but I didn't. I didn't have any aspirations other than graduating at that point. And I just to get out of school.
So what happens? You mentioned your sophomore year. You're kind of like your grades are bottoming out. Do we keep going in that direction, or does it all change when we get sober? Like how do you kind of change course in college?
No, I don't change any course. Right. The only blip I had was I got caught with a lot of marijuana by my parents, and they threatened me not to be able to go back to school. So I agreed to go see a drug counselor who was a friend of a priest friend from the neighborhood. And so I didn't drink or smoke any pot or anything for a week. And I went to see this guy once a week while during the summer. I went to see him 2 or 3 times. Every time I would go straight. But after like the 3rd or 4th time, I started bringing a beer on the way home in the car, or I'd smoke a half a joint in my dad's car on the way back, or I felt like I got one over on him, and my whole goal was to get back to school because I was threatened with not being able to go back to school, and that was really scary. So I convinced my father to let me go back to school. The ramifications were, if you don't get good grades and you don't do well, like you can't do what you did sophomore year. So probably got like a 2.7 my junior year, first semester, second semester, which I'm telling you, it was no different than any other semester. But I'll never forget, I got a B+, 3 Bs, and a C+ for a 3 up. Right? And I didn't do anything. And my roommate was even mad at me because he got he failed some class or something and was so mad at me for doing okay, and I didn't do anything, So needless to say, I was okay, right? And I got through that junior year, and I was able to go work in the summer, come back, and try to get out of there.
So So how does senior year go? And it kind of leads up to you
Senior year is a hot mess. I was back to the races again. As soon as I got to school, I was up and, and running. Like a lot of guys had left that were friends of mine, but we still had guys that were doing their 5th year, hanging around, guys that never graduated, guys that, lived in the area still. And then a lot of my buddies that were in my grade that were trying to get out. And it was just, I ended up getting a relationship with a girl from Rosemont who was the nicest girl in the world. I didn't know what she was doing with me, and I was running around just doing my same old thing, maybe hiding it a little more, just trying to get out of school. And then second semester, I was really in trouble because I didn't know if I was going to graduate, because I didn't know if I was going to pass 1 or 2 classes. I found out the day before graduation that I got a D in my investments class, and I was the happiest guy in the world because I knew I was going to get out. And the guy's like, "You're getting a D," and I'm like, I know what I'm getting, but I'm getting my diploma, and that's how my father's coming to my graduation. So I'm thrilled. And that's honestly the way I felt. And he's like, aren't you worried that you're not going to be able to get a job? I go, no, don't worry about that.
So the anxiety was around just getting the degree and appeasing your dad and on to the next whatever.
Exactly. You know, and so my thought process was that, you know, I didn't, if I always thought I'd be some type of salesman, so I always felt like you didn't need to have a 4.0. I had a 4.0 street cue. I used to say to my, you know, in my interviews, you know, the guys would say, look at your grades on my first job interview. And I'm like, what are you looking at my grades for? Is this a sales job? Like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, I can sell. And by then I was sober. So, you know, we haven't gotten to that, but that was the whole thing that gave me the confidence.
All right, get us to that. What happens? You know, you get your diploma, you graduate college, and then what happens?
We have like senior week, right? So you have senior week, like you need another week, right? But
this is before you graduate.
I think after it.
Okay.
Right after, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we're running around doing our thing, and then we graduate. I was the only guy out of my main group who got his diploma. So believe it or not, that's how these are the winners that I hung out with, right? All these other guys weren't getting their diplomas. They walked through graduation, but weren't getting their diplomas. And so I was just elated that I got out, and I was able to go back to New York, figuring I was going to start interviewing for jobs that I would get for my father, helping me networking and stuff like that. So I felt like I was going to get a job. I just needed to pass a drug test and not be an idiot. And I'm going out every night till early in the morning, staying out. My father would be up on like a Saturday to go play tennis or reading the paper, and I'm walking in. So after 3 weeks, my twin brother said to my parents that I couldn't go a day without smoking pot. That was it. He didn't say anything else. And so I went out that day to a buddy's house.
Sorry.
I was worried about my phone going off and yours.
Good Lord. What unprofessional.
All right, go ahead.
How about Mike Hamilton's ears right now, huh?
Yeah, poor guy. Poor Mike.
So anyway, my parents bring me back to my house and have an intervention with me.
This is the day, because the phone rang. So you go to a party that day, right?
No, I just go to somebody's house in the morning. We're probably smoking a joint in the guy's backyard.
Okay.
And my father comes and grabs me and says, get in the car.
Oof.
And he said, we're talking to your mother and I right now, and she's at the house. And we need you to go away to a rehab, or you're going to get thrown out of the house. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. You know, all this, you got to be kidding me. So they had an intervention, no interventionist, no experience doing this. They had a place for me to go to because my twin brother's best friend's family was well known to rehabs. So I go home, I have like 4 hours in the room, and finally I agree to go. I just broke down and said, you know, because it was a problem.
Well, yeah, why'd you agree?
Yeah.
Well, I was broke. I had nowhere to go if I was leaving the house, because that was the ultimatum. And my father asked me to put my hand out, see how much I was shaking. And my hand was like rattling, you know. And I said, I'm shaking because I'm nervous, because you're talking about all this stuff. And he's like, no, you're not, you know. And I don't know, it was that moment of clarity, I guess, that I just said to myself, you know, let's go. So
had you ever thought it was a problem up until that point?
And after my junior and senior year,
okay.
You know, I just figured maybe I could taper off, you know, like you got more mature and older and you stopped doing the drugs and you just drank. But there was no end to this. It wasn't going to end well.
When you get to the treatment center, what goes down? Like, how are you relieved, or are you like, this is bogus?
I got there my first night. I went to a place called St. Mary's out in Minneapolis. It's down the block from Hazleton. At the time, St. Mary's and this place, Stricker, in New York City, were like the places. And I didn't want to go in New York City because I was afraid I could go out the fire exit, and I knew where I was. And if I did that in Minneapolis, it wasn't, it wasn't going to happen. So I took a plane ride out there, a one-way ticket, got there. They checked me in. They checked all my stuff. And then I got to my room and I just started crying. I was like, oh my God, my wife's older. I'm over. I'm 21. This is the worst day of my life. Like, and my brothers both said to me, you'll just learn how to stay off the drugs and you can back and drink. And I was like, I think I should drink on the way out there because I don't think this is going to end well. And they said they would pick me up with a 6-pack, right? So that's how much we all knew.
Mm-hmm.
So I cried. I got up the next morning. I'm in there for 28 days. I showed up. My parents came out for the Parents' Week. It's the first time I saw my father cry. Like, he could not hold it together. Getting back in the cab, going back to the airport again. It was, and then it was realization for me, having been a little bit sober, a little bit dry for a couple of weeks, that it was, the family part of this. I never thought I was really bothering anybody, but to see your father cry, who never cried before, kind of lit me up with a realization that this is what they were talking about, that family disease. And I found out about my mother's side of the family and the disease piece of this whole thing. And it resonated for what it's worth. So I do 30 days in there, and that was the summer of 1986. So it was going into July 4th. So I stayed there right around that weekend. And then they wanted me to go to a halfway house in the Catskills. And believe it or not, I talked them out of it.
Were you at this point embracing sobriety, or are you, because you're 21? Like, are you thinking?
I am absolutely petrified.
Okay.
Right. I'm absolutely petrified. I knew that I had to go to meetings when I went out. I was identifying as chemically dependent when I was there. I wasn't even saying I was an alcoholic, And so my head was spinning. And I didn't know anybody who didn't drink and do drugs. I didn't know anyone. So I'm like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I'm going home to Rockaway, the Irish Riviera, in the middle of the summer, right? It's just like, it was crazy.
So what did you do?
I got home. I went to a meeting out in JFK Airport because I didn't want to go near my house, which was like 35, 40 minutes away. And there was a meeting there. It was my first meeting out of rehab. And I raised my hand and, got a clap that, it was my first meeting. And I went back there the next day. They said, come back. So I went back the next day. And in the corner of the room was a buddy of mine that I grew up with, my buddy Steve, who was in the back seat of that car where the two girls died.
Oh.
When I was 16, he was in the back seat. He crawled out the back and lived, and he was going to meetings. So I said, "Oh, you come out here because you don't want anybody to see you?" He goes, "No, I work out here. It's lunchtime." And he said, "I'll pick you up Friday night." He picked me up Friday night at my parents' house where I was living, and drove me to a meeting about 2 miles from my house. And there was everybody. It was amazing.
Everybody.
His friends, my father's friends, my friends, guys that, disappear or whatever, like aren't around anymore. And it was a smoke-filled AA meeting on a Friday night, packed. And that became my whole group. And that's where I got my sponsor. And, I just latched on. And a couple other guys got sober. There was a couple of guys in there getting sober. And it's a program of attraction. These guys were doing it. Why couldn't I do it? Right. I thought I was going to get a Wall Street kind of guy as my sponsor. My guy was a New York City sanitation man. His name was Kevin. And he was the best thing that ever happened. He used to say, keep the faith, which is something I say to this day. When he would see me every day, just keep the faith. It's going to work. I promise you, keep the faith. He had a wife and 3 kids and had a great life. And was just really just a superhuman being. He took me under his wing. And then when I was a year and sober, I had my family came to the meeting and a buddy of mine and his wife and I spoke and it was awesome. And then I moved to Philly a week later. I got a job. I was interviewing for a job in Philly, same job, same company, but one in New York and one in Philly. And, when you're in an interview, you say, oh, yeah, I went to school here, I know the area, and they only offered me the Philly job, not the New York job. So in 1987, I moved to Philly, only a year and a couple of weeks sober. And I got a single studio apartment down at Presidential Apartments down in Bala Cynwyd.
Bala, yeah.
And that's where, my coming back to Philly started.
Are you fearful at this point because you're moving away from home a year into it?
I was kind of excited. I had a couple of buddies down here. Nobody great. I just felt like, New York, it was hard. I got a job in New York my first year. And it was hard living in New York, not making a lot of money, living at home, not hanging out with anybody because I just knew AA people. So I wouldn't go out with the people I worked with for cocktails after work. I would just go home, so I was riding the train in, riding the train out. And I was just like, I don't know. I just felt like it was the right thing. And so I moved. And then I met my buddy, Timmy, who was my best friend in college. He was moving back. And then we ended up moving in together a year later. And that's how I met my wife, who worked with him and all these other guys that I became really good friends with. And so I stayed sober. I lived in the city for a while, went to meetings in the city, even did the mustard seed stuff and the lawyers meeting downtown in the city. And then I got in a relationship and I still went to meetings, but I wasn't working my program and didn't have a go-to sponsor. I'm not sure my sponsor knew I was a sponsee, And at 5 years sober, I had my head up my ass, really bad. I went to see, the relationship ended. I started going seeing a psychiatrist. I doubled down on meetings. I got a new sponsor. And things just started to click because I started working the steps, specifically did 4 and 5, 6 and 7, and my life changed. Kind of like I did my 5th step with a guy in New York, who was a friend of my family's, who was an older gentleman who had a lot of time. And I walked into his house on a Saturday morning and walked out feeling like somebody took 80 pounds off my shoulders.
And I've heard you say this before. You did not work the steps really, like that 5th step was the first time you did it 5 years into sobriety, right?
Yeah, it was horrible, and because I was young and I felt like I was I filled I filled that hole that I filled with alcohol and drugs with, right? You fill it with everything but what you're supposed to fill it with, right?
Yeah.
And I did all that, and that all wore off and didn't work. So it was eventually the drink or start doing the work. And back then, you got to remember I left, right? So I didn't have the same sponsor, and I moved down here, and I got a guy, but I'm not really, engaged. And if you're showing up and doing stuff, you feel like, you're hey, I'm going to meetings, I'm not drinking. And back then, it wasn't like it is today, where somebody was taking you through the steps. I've heard Dave C. talk about this too. You just you had to go figure it out for yourself, and I didn't have to do that, but I had to go realize that I needed to do it. And and I still have the same sponsor today, 32 years later.
So you talk about, like, there's a couple of things you say. One of the things you say that really speaks to what you're talking about now is like, AA is a bridge to life. It's not a tunnel to more meetings. I mean, I look at you, you're one of the more social guys period, with
Yeah.
just friends everywhere, never met a stranger type deal. And, you know, early in sobriety, I see that start to happen as you take me through your story. Like, was it around that 5-year mark where you really started to kind of pound the pavement with the program that you were able to sort of open up and like really do stuff outside of AA with passion and vigor and enjoyment?
Yeah. I was certainly, I was just going through the motions, and I was not drinking. I would say I wasn't really sober in the truest sense of the world, which to me means, right, having a sponsor, going to meetings, being in service, working the steps, giving back. I didn't have all those qualities, and I think it showed. You know, I was really immature still. I hadn't really kind of walked myself through a path of dealing with my past. So it wasn't as if I was this, you know, curmudgeon young kid or whatever, right? But I certainly had a temper, and I felt more like a victim than I was in terms of being given a gift that I should cherish. And 5 years, that all changed, you know. And then I met my wife. You know, we're almost married 30 years now, and I had my kids, and I moved out of the city. I moved to the suburbs, and just got plugged in out there, and I've never not gone. I've always showed up, and I know that's huge. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people with time that I have that don't show up anymore, because to them it's like, well, I'm not going to drink anymore. But you know, for those young guys that were there with me in the beginning, that guy that was at the door that shook my hand through that meeting in my neighborhood and said, "We've been waiting for you. We got a chair for you." You know, they weren't kidding. You know, they knew who I was, and knew from a lot of people that certainly had issues. And so I want to be there for that guy that walks through that door. And I love talking to the young. I've got a 19-year-old sponsee right now who's just the best, you know. And I love those young guys who are trying to get it at a young age and listening to, hey, go to this sober house and work these steps and get a job, like Pete did at KFC, and this kid's right now a barista, you know, and he works at a gelato place now. You know, it's just, and he's like, I'm like, dude, you got to do it, you know, and you got to do this. And now I'm taking him through the steps. It's just great.
Hey, well, you told Mike, real quick, you told the story, and I always tell it. You're playing golf with a guy. You both have a lot of time, but this guy doesn't go to meetings anymore. And he says, yeah, you know, I'm doing good. I'm doing great. And you said to him, so you got yours. So fuck everybody else. Yeah. And that, I love that story because it's true. And you're like seeing these young kids would never have you in their life if you had just kind of checked out and been like, life is good. I'm chilling, you know?
And they do what I give them, I get back tenfold. So and if people kind of knew that, because they weren't engaged, they are engaged, and they're out there sticking their hand out, they would realize how wonderful it feels. You know, it really is in all aspects of your life when you bring somebody along, right? And you help somebody. I mean, where isn't that a great thing? You know, I've been in sales for 37 years, and I love teaching young guys how to do this job and how to help them. And that's why I got into management. You know, I wasn't just a selfish sales guy who just wanted to write his own business and just be, I am now, but I wasn't back then. You know, I like to bring and mentor people and bring people along and watch them have good careers and buy a house for their, for themselves and their wife and their kids, and, you know, put money away I just think it's great. So, you know, what I'm trying to give that 19-year-old kid is just to show him that I got sober at 21, right? And I'm 59 now, and you could live this life, and give them a lot of hope that maybe they just need one day, maybe another, and the next day, I don't know, but to just keep pounding them with this opportunity that they have in front of them and not look at it as a death sentence, which a lot of kids do. You can tell real fast. And as you guys know, you stick with the winners, right?
Yeah, that's where, you've come into my life, right? Like just being around you for, more than my time sober. And I was like, I want to, and it took me a while because, to your point, service. My life changed when I started to become of service like 6 or 7 years ago. And that's where our relationship really grew. But I have a question for you, because you and I have something in common, being the first sober in a alcoholic family.
Yeah.
And, I want to hear, like, what was that like for you, being the torchbearer?
Well, everybody was very supportive. I could say that, but everybody was still on their journey. My mother and father didn't drink around me for a while. My father went to Al-Anon for a ton of years. My mother stopped drinking before, way before I did. And they kept the booze out of the house for the most part. And then, it's a program of attraction. And I would get calls from people, family members saying, hey, what's going on here? And some of them have followed me. But then we have this tree of like cousins, and now, my sister-in-law's nephews are in now, and all these other people kind of came up from this whole thing. But I like you, was the first, right? And I'm the youngest in my family, only by 10 minutes. But it's different, right? Because there's not much that they don't know about life, but this I really know. I'm uniquely qualified to help somebody else and bring somebody down that path. Whether it's a family member, right? It's probably easier when it's not a family member because there's so much pain involved, right? But I have this gift that I you got to give away.
What about some of the stuff you do? I mean, you're constantly, I don't want to say constantly, but you're going on like 12-step calls. People are calling, hey, Scott's the kind of guy we can have talk to this person. Yeah. And a 12-step call is basically when somebody's, really bad and they need help getting to treatment or getting to a meeting. How about all the stuff you do with that? It's pretty amazing.
I just get calls, from people, and I'll go and talk to anybody. I never go alone. I grab a co-pilot, and it's fun, actually. It's kind of interesting because usually they don't want to go and they're not going to listen to you. And I'll just get up and walk out. I say, well, you know what? You got all the answers. When you don't, I said, the only way we're ever going to see each other again is if you start going to meetings. Otherwise, our paths probably won't cross. And your life is going to suck. And mine doesn't. And then I kind of leave. There's nothing I can do. And then the seed's planted. Sometimes they come around and they pick up the phone a couple of days later. And sometimes they don't. And you never hear from them again. And, that happens in the program too. But, I just enjoy it. And, you're around the lawn, it's people's kids, and you're talking to people's kids who have problems that kind of want to, sometimes it's just the parents that want to scare them, or sometimes it's real. And whatever they're telling you, it's probably 10 times as worse. Because it's really tough out there in regards to what's going on with today's kids and with everything with fentanyl and the heroin crisis and everything. It's awful.
Speaking of that, how have you raised, you got a wonderful wife and you got 2 beautiful daughters. We just saw one of them.
Yeah.
How have you raised these kids in an environment where that you've got the ism? So, you never know, right, about the offspring. And just in today's world where, nobody knows better than an alcoholic about what lurks out there. Yeah. So how do you bring your kids up at a time like this?
I've just been brutally honest. If they ask me a question, I'm not holding that. And I know people who don't do that, but for me, I just felt like if you ever tried this, yes or no, yeah, you know, you know, you named it, I did it, other than heroin, you know, and so I just answer those questions. But I also know that the longer a young kid stays away from booze, it gives their brain more time to develop. I've talked to Mike B and those guys about this, and they told me always just to be honest. So I don't actually know any more than I know, and like you're raised in a sober house where there's no booze in your house versus somewhere else where you know you've seen mom and dad get a load on or whatever, or there's problems in the house and all that kind of stuff. You kind of just run with that. So I think that just being in a sober house and seeing the way we act, that it has a positive effect on people and the kids. But I obviously don't have control over whether or not they have the gene or not. And I haven't seen it, but who knows, right? Who knows if it shows up later in life? I hope not. But, you know, they know where to go, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And hang in there and take this compliment, but your success inside recovery has led to great success outside professionally and personally. And now you're, you know, you navigate some big time waters every day in your life. You know, do you ever stop and think, man, like this is a kid from Rockaway who his mom and his dad grabbed him one day when he was in a backyard. Hey, come on, you're coming with us, and you're going to rehab.
No, I agree. You know, yeah, like I feel like I'm the most successful guy I know because I've got time, and what I mean by that is sober. I don't care about anything else. And you know, I'm down here in Florida for 3 months, and I'm working from here. And if I have to go home, I go home. But my mom's down the road. My mom's 10 minutes away, and my mom's in a facility for memory care. She's been there almost 5 years. She's on the end stages of Alzheimer's. She can't really talk anymore. And I promised myself when I got down here that I would go every day to see her. And, you know, it's not as if she's going to remember or anything like that. But, you know, I reminded myself before I got here that she was the one, right? She was the catalyst that smacked me in the head and put the room together and was the person who didn't want to see her son end up like her brother who went off the building. She wanted me to have a life. And if I was abusing drugs or alcohol, she didn't want to see that continue for her son. And so because of her, I get to live this great life. And, you know, my father died 17 years ago and asked us to take good care of my mom. I'm not sure he knew what he was asking, you know, the last couple of years, as you guys know, yeah. Right? Yeah. You know just as well as me. And it's just, I'm just trying to show up for her now every day and just give her a kiss, tell her I love her. And sometimes it's that quick and I walk out of it, you know? And so the way I can pay her back right now is just show up every day for her and be that son that, you know, that should walk in there every day and spend some time with her and not disregard it, you know, even though I'm down the block. So I'm kind of paying tribute to her right now by showing up every day, you know? And that's how I feel so good, right? You know, it's just being able to be able to go see her every day, and eventually, you know, most of the time she'll have a moment where she'll give me a kiss or tell me she loves me or mumble it at the best. But that's all I can get right now. I'll take it. That's the
you've always been such an example to me of the community, right, of sobriety, and you know, about 6-7 years ago. When my dad started to really slip, our dad, Peter's dad too, right? Started to get sick, and the Eagles were on the Super Bowl run, and I was complaining one day about, you know, he really wanted me to come over and watch the game with him, the NFC Championship, and I'm like, I just want to go home and just chill at my place and watch it. And after a meeting, you know, you pull me aside and say, if I could watch one more game with my father, I'd give anything. And that hit me. And I went over there and I, watched that game and then the Super Bowl, and I still remember it, right? That's the beauty of this thing. Like, I pay that forward, but I mean, that's huge for me that I had that time because somebody, you shared that with me. That's the beauty of this whole thing.
And even Pete, you look at your brother, I mean, right? Remember when he was first getting sober and he came up from rehab and he was around, right? And he was trying to get his whole life together. He was dealing with some of his past and stuff. And you look at him now and he's, he's a lot more open about his recovery. But, the stuff he's doing now, and he's doing games and everybody knows who he is. It's freaking awesome. I just miss him. That's the problem. Is that he's down in Texas.
I know, right? God.
But it's great, man, and that warms my heart from that time.
Well, from when I would come back in, I was in and out, and Scott would look at me and be like, "You gonna stay this time?" I'd be like, "Fuck," But that's the seed. That is that. You were standing at the door saying, "Are you gonna stay this time?" That's and you're doing that with 25, 30 years at the time. I mean, it's just amazing, right? All right.
Awesome. Look at you.
Yeah. Anything else, guys?
Yeah.
No, this is great. I love you both guys, man. You guys have been through a lot, man. It's not easy losing your brother, and the way you guys carried yourself and how you handled your mom and certainly your dad. It warms my heart, dude. I know it's painful. And to see you guys both walk through that together and stand there with you, with Pete and Murph and all the other guys is a testament to how much people care about you guys and how much respect they have for you.
Yeah. You've been there for us the whole time, man, and it means a lot.
You got it. And you guys both love to laugh and break balls.
Oh, I know. We haven't, that's so much. Like, our first thought is how to bust someone's balls, right? Like, I mean, it's the greatest, right? It's our love. I said that because you and I talk about it when I was talking about
It's our love language.
It's our,
100%.
Always.
I saw you were going to say it, so I said it first.
Yeah.
All right, the battery's going to die on this fucking thing. I don't know what Mike Hamilton's up to, but Mike, anyways, it's good that we're done.
What's the matter?
The battery's going to die on the iPad, Mike. I mean, look. Well, we're.
Oh my, yeah.
I don't
Seriously, Mike, this guy.
But we're good. We're good anyways. Guys, I love you. Scott, I can't thank you enough. I'll send you a link.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. This will be probably done on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Boy, that was great. Thanks so
really
much,
was,
guys.
Scott. I love you, brother.
All right, boys.
Oh, I love you, brother.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.